Hi, it is noon on Wednesday Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and I'm Janet Fitch, and this is Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions, um, craft questions, psychological questions, physiological questions, existential questions. Um, Whatever you would like to talk about, I am happy to discuss all things writing. Um, I uh, I have questions today, several questions. But if you have questions for me today, put them in the chat, and I'll be happy to talk to you about them. And if you have questions for me in between Wednesdays, which is most of the time, um, you can send me your questions at janetfitchwrites.com, which is my website. So write to me through my website, and I will be happy to make a Writing Wednesday around your question. So welcome. Hey, Amy, nice to see you. Thank you for coming. Um, I have been, for myself, I've been working on edits have come back on my book work in progress, as you guys are all calling it. The uh, the first job was shortening it considerably. Excuse me. The first job was shortening it, and it was removing three characters, and this is just battlefield surgery. I want to call it. Sarah says, "Does the work in progress have a working title?" Yes, it does, but I hate it. So the less I use it, the more I feel like the more likely it is that I'm going to find a better title. Um, uh, so getting rid of pages, I got rid of three characters. Hi, Laura. Three major secondary characters. Um, and I just ripped them out by the roots. So the thing is like open and bleeding, where uh, these characters were torn out of it. Um, I don't. I didn't want to spend time healing it yet. Uh, First, just the brute force of ripping characters out, and then I'll leave it to kind of just be open before I figure out how to sew it up again, because I am also going to be adding a character at this late date. I mean, I've been working on this for a long time, and the idea of adding a character, major character, point of view character, is kind of jarring. It's difficult. But I am reading a book right now that, I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but there's a book that came up from the library called The Talent Code, and talking about how um, certain pockets of unlikely mastery have come out in the world, people who come out of left field, and or groups of people have come out of left field and are just inordinately successful. And why does that happen? He talks about um, a 13-year-old clarinetist who just stumbled on, really, she processes very, very quickly, and she's not aware that she's doing it, so she comes in and out of it. There's an inventor who invented a flight simulator. He just saw what was needed, and the simulation evidently was something that was ignored for a long time, that he was disregarded. It was just a toy. People thought it was just a toy. You learn to fly by flying and crashing, and then a lot of people don't make it, right, because they die. But it was at some point they realized that the simulation, as I think it was the buildup to World War II, that you don't want to lose that many people, as you're, and that it turns out this guy who had had a lot of miles on the simulator using instruments instead of visual the way the barnstormers did it, was able to fly in heavy weather, which they didn't expect him to be able to do, and he showed them how to use this flight simulator. And once the war started, they had to have thousands of pilots training in a way that wouldn't destroy their planes. They bought like 10,000 simulators from this guy, and evidently he also did simulators for the Apollo mission, of learning how to operate the craft and um, all the arms and the devices and stuff, without doing it on the Apollo craft itself. So he obviously became extremely enriched by that invention. But at first, he was just towing around to amusement parks. Nobody would understand that it was not just a toy, that simulation of an activity is a great way to come up against the obstacles of whatever you're trying to master. It's a way that you can push um, your own limitations. You can take risks that you couldn't take in a plane. You couldn't take when your life actually depends on it. And this book called The Talent Code, I don't like reading pop psychology all that much, but it was interesting. He talks about simulation as a way of accelerating learning. And he talks about soccer, which, sports, not something that I care about whatsoever. But even I am aware that Brazil has an especially talented bunch of soccer players that are admired all over the world. And I guess this somebody from Leeds who had a junior team on Leeds went to Brazil to try to figure out why they were so damn good and inventing these moves that nobody else had. Um, and evidently, there was a game that these soccer players play in Brazil. They come from very impoverished backgrounds. And they play a game called, it's like uh, futsal. It has a name like that. I forgot the actual name. Futsal. That's played on a basketball sized court on concrete or on dirt or on whatever they've got, because these are very poor people living in the favelas and stuff. They don't have a lot of room, they don't have grass, they don't have gardeners, they make do. And so it's played on a small court with a ball that is half the size of a soccer ball and twice the weight of a soccer ball. And they interact with that ball much more heavily because the court is small, the ball is small. It's all about the passing and, not so much just running for the goal or being the hero, but you have to pass, 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 pass. It's a very fast game. He says it's like basketball, um, and played very much in the same way. And people are fanatic in the neighborhoods about this game, and all the kids play it, and they play it relentlessly, you know, I mean, hours and hours and hours, much more than the kids at Leeds that this guy's home team was. They play, they might do 20 hours a week. They're obsessed. So when they get onto a big soccer field, they have moves that nobody has. They have control over the ball. They can do things that nobody can do. And he says he can watch that game, watch a soccer game, and see, and he can recognize who's played this futsal, um, because of the tricks they can do with the ball. And they pass. They don't hog the ball. They handle the ball in futsal 600 times more than they do in a regular soccer game. They handle it all the time because the court is very small, and the only way you're going to score is by passing, 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 passing. Um, so what does this have to do with writing? Okay. The simulation of whatever it is that you are trying for is like working in a short, it's like the argument for writing short stories before you try the novel, actually. But it's also seen. It's bearing down on a small chunk of something and doing it over and over and over it relentlessly until what he's interested in the brain science of it. So there's a coating on your nerves called myelin. It's the coating on the nerves everywhere in the body, but in the brain especially, it it fortifies the uh, it wraps, wrapping the synapses and stuff, the axons and what have you. Um, that the more you need to use one set of connections, the more myelin will be built around those connections to help stabilize that nerve and protect it, and increases the speed and the bandwidth of that connection. So, what does this mean for us as writers? Because that's all I care about. I don't care about soccer. But I do care about excellence, and I do care about creativity, and I do care about speed and being connected to what you're doing. And that there is this um, neuro this neural phenomena of myelinization that reinforces the learning and the speed of learning and the speed of connection that happens in athletes, it happens in artists, it happens in science, it happens in every field. And I'm thinking, oh my God, it's built by effort. The effort of trying, failing, trying, failing, trying, failing, trying, failing builds up this myelinization. And it's a way of, like a simulator, you can make the mistakes, you can make the mistakes. Whereas when you are in an actual plane, you're going to crash. You're afraid, you're not going to push it because, you don't want to end up in a fiery ball in a field somewhere. Whereas in a simulator, you can try stuff out, you can change it, you can make mistakes, you can crash and burn over and over again. Like playing the clarinet, you can crash and burn all over again. There's no end to the mistakes you could make, but you keep learning as you muscle in there. The learning broadens that myelinization of the pathways that you need. Okay, so by doing things that are hard, and he's saying how this is why the ease of finding information now is working against student learning in schools, because the myelinization builds up with effort. So if you can just look something, you go, what is that? And you look it up, and then 10 minutes later, you don't remember what you looked up. And I see that with kids all the time, looking stuff, mom says, look it up. And they just go and look it up on their phone, and it doesn't take any effort. So they don't retain it. He was saying the difference between, failing better, Jennifer says, the Beckett quote. It's exposing yourself to failure and trying and failing, actually builds the brain, and it builds the connection to be able to do it faster. He was saying how if you are at a party and there's somebody and you've forgotten their name, oh God, who is that? Who is that? Who is that? If somebody tells you their name, it's very likely that you will forget it again, like immediately. But if you force yourself to fight through it, and it's like, who is that? Who's that? Who's that? You know, Ben, Bob, Boo, Ben, Bill. Oh yeah, Bill something. Yeah. You know, when you fight through it, then you will remember it. Um, so what does it have to do with writing? Okay, here I am, and I am creating a character at this late date. I've finished my book. I've gone back and torn out three big characters. I got like 100 pages out of this book is gone. Um, and it's still like an open wound. But I have to add a third person who was never in the book. I've gone years writing this book, and suddenly I need a third character. And I've resisted. Of course, I resisted. Who wouldn't? You know, it's like, oh, I don't work like that. You know, my characters come organically through my own unconscious processes and the things that I'm at war with inside myself. You know, I have the characters to begin with, and or the ones that evolve out of organically out of the scenes. But to how do you know, I don't create characters out of whole cloth. And then I read this book. I'm not even done with it. I'm just maybe 50 pages in. And I think, oh my God, I don't do that. I don't work that way, I'm hearing myself say. And then it's like, oh, but if I do it and throw myself at it and fail, which I've already started doing, creating a character and scrapping and creating a different character and scrap. I mean, I'm looking for a character who's going to work a certain way in the book, which is not how I write. Um, but I need this. And I was pretty depressed when I started reading this book. Um, and, but I was thinking last night, it's like, no, you're doing the thing. You're doing the trying and failing part that is actually building that neural connection, building the myelinization of that process. That just because I haven't done it doesn't mean that I shouldn't do it. You know, I certainly have learned to do things in this writing world that um, I was never able to do before. I had to learn how to write a scene, you know, where something happens in the scene and they can't go back to the way they were. I've learned how to write dialogue. I was pretty good at writing dialogue, but I learned compression and I learned people putting pressure on each other. I learned how to, uh, I could never describe anything. You know, I started just like everybody else. I couldn't do anything, basically. I could create character and dialogue was pretty good, but I couldn't tell a story, um, but real story, you know, because I couldn't write a scene. I didn't know what a scene was. So, you know, obviously there was no movement. Um, I had to learn other things, and now I have to learn this. And it's kind of you know, I was kind of despairing until I read this and reminded myself, oh, you know, this, I can't do it yet, but the more I do it, the closer I'm going to get to learning how to do it. So Laura asks, why is this book writing process so different than the others? Is it the characters? It is, um, it's about the form. It's about form. There's something that is needed um, specifically in this book that before my organic processes were working fine, But this book actually it was way too long. So I tore out three characters who didn't really go anywhere. Because when you work organically, you create more than you need, like nature itself. It creates, see, this is the thing, nature creates what it needs and more than it needs. It just keeps creating, creating, creating. This is the downside of being a pantser, as they say, seat of your pants, is you create a lot of stuff you don't need. And then the discipline comes with recognizing that you don't need it, usually because it's too long. So what can I get rid of? Okay, so that's nature. It just creates a lot of stuff and then it dies. It goes extinct. It never makes it into the final cut. And then there's something that needs to be there structurally. But that's not how you work. You don't create on demand. It comes naturally. It comes organically, symphonically, reacting, within the scenes. But now I see that there's a gap. There's somebody who is missing there. And the difficulty is trying to create a character to meet the needs of the book. It's not how I work, but it's how I'm going to work. It's kind of how I'm going to work with this book. And it's very scary. So, why is this book writing process different than the others? Yeah, because this needed to be cut down tremendously, and that has not been the case so far. So the title of the book that I'm referencing, GB asks, is called The Talent Code. And it's one of those, pop psych things that, about the brain that are, people are very interested in the brain, body, spirit, how they feed each other and the operations of the brain. So it's called The Talent Code. And it's really more not the psychology of the brain, but the physiology of the brain, how that works, and how mastery is built, and how to shorten the learning to do something. This guy doesn't believe it's so much about innate talent as it is the talent that is built by the person and their effort. And the way it's built in certain ways maximizes success. Failure, like, talking about the Beckett quote about fail better, that Jennifer brought up, it's a physiological explanation of why fail better is really, really important. So here I'm looking at all these discarded characters that I've been trying to create to fill that need. And instead of being depressed about it, now I'm encouraged. It's like, I think I will get this. I think I will succeed. So I wanted to share that. I do have questions too from the interwebs. So anybody have any questions about this stuff? It's Laura says, I admire the hard work that you're doing. Yeah, there's no way around but through. I mean, you're up there in the Arctic and you're eating your dogs. There's no choice but to finish. I can't abandon this after this many years. Amy says Malcolm Gladwell has a book about mastering something by doing it for 10,000 hours. Yeah. So that fits right into this myelinization thing, is the repetition of the effort makes a broader connection, a big fat connection. And so I'm still doing my 10,000 hours. I think I've got more than that, but I guess, that's just the beginning, because every book is different and has different needs. So you're always a beginner. You're always creating the tools you need. You're always facing those difficulties. You're never there. There's no there with writing or any kind of art. You can't, you never get there. You're always faced with a new problem you've never seen before. Um, so GB says in the pipeline welding work, learning how to weld, the saying goes, one has to burn 6,000 rods before one can even consider himself a welder. Yeah. And people who ride motorcycles, until you've had a bad motorcycle accident, you're not really a rider because you're not taking into account like the death quality. So Amy says, no way around but through is what Churchill said about hell. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, I've been reading a lot of Huxley quotes. They're very good. So we have some other questions going today. But I'm thinking about my myelinization now. I got up and I had water instead of coffee first thing. I'm thinking more about my hydration and a little more exercise, a little less, you know, uh, alcoholization and whatever, you use your body to feel better. Thinking more about my brain and how to support this process. So here's a question I thought was really interesting. Um, I uh, there there were a group of questions about description of emotion, and description of emotion is really uh, you have to be very careful about a description of emotion because what people often do is um, they label instead of describe. So GB says, I hope your new character knocks on your door soon. Yeah, I think I'm maybe. We'll see if she ends up on the floor. I had a new one today. I keep throwing myself at it. Um, so um, there were like, how do you describe a time where you were the most happy in life? How do you express romantic feeling? Um, how when something touches a character's heart, how you do that. Um, I think the first thing you do is you have to really, really be careful about the cliche because emotions have been described for thousands of years. And your job as a writer is it's not to describe the emotion as much as it is to make the reader feel the emotion that your character is feeling. So just saying she was super happy, well, good for her. You read that and who cares? I'm not feeling happy. So you got to make the reader feel happy. You got to make the reader feel, here's another one, what touches your heart, which is already a little sentimental for my taste, but, how to, it's not how to move how the character is feeling moved, it's how the reader is feeling moved. So you do this in several ways. First of all, you study the physiological response to an emotion. And we've talked about that using the Rosetta Stone. You study your own physiology by submitting yourself to stimulus that makes you feel an emotion. So you can watch a movie or you can look at photographs. Photographs are pretty easy because you can put them aside and write and then get them back. Whatever it is, so you put the emotion and then watch how the emotion travels through the body. Where does it start? Where, if you watch an emotion in your body, you will see it move around. It doesn't stay in one place. Like there might be an emotion. I don't have my Rosetta Stone here, but it might start here. Like a lot of the times I get this, I call this sort of the gills. I feel something under here. But if I don't stop there, if I watch it, it'll move. It'll move down here, move into my arms or my guts, or it moves around and then finally leaves the body. So you write all that down, and then when you're writing a character who is experiencing a strong emotion, you can describe the physical reaction, but being very, very careful not to use cliches. You know, a sickening feeling in my stomach is just, you have to do better than that. You're identifying it, but you need a, if you want that feeling of a drop in your stomach, then you have to find the metaphor for a drop. Is it the big plunge at Magic Mountain? Is it, you know, the elevator that, jolts suddenly another half floor? You have to think about what gives you that falling feeling. Um, if it's touching my heart, which don't touch your heart. Well, um, you, but something moves you, a tenderness comes over you. How do you express that in the body? How does that feel? Is it warm? Is it cold? Is it hot? Is it soft? Is it, um, does it dissolve you a bit? And then dissolve you like what? In a way that the reader will experience it, rather than just the character. Sometimes if you, I mean, avoid the sentimentality. If you hear violins, run. But if you want something, it's a good exercise. And you talk about building that myelin circuit. Exercises are wonderful, to have a character who, uh, somebody's heart is touched. Well, you have to figure out what is touching to that person. Um, you know, you're in a crabby mood, and a kid like gives you a flower, say, off the top of my head. I'm not thrilled with it, but and then it's the shock of the distance between your bad mood and somebody kind of breaking in on your bad mood, you know. Um, and then how do you describe that in a way that the reader will feel it? So the the recipient of all information on the page is the reader, um, not, oh, I described the breathtaking view of the mountain so well. But if you can't instill that in the reader, you've failed. So try again. Um, how do I express romantic feelings? One of the most romantic, I have a friend who writes erotica, and she wrote a story that was the hottest thing I'd read in a long time. Just two people in an elevator. This woman, she had a character who was a language teacher, private language teacher, who gets in an elevator, and her student, I think it's the student, or maybe it's just some guy, gets in the elevator with her, and he is so attractive. And she's trying not to look at him. She's trying to, the harder the character tries not to engage, the hotter it is, because you are aware of everything as you're trying not to. it's, it's a great move. I used to work for a movie magazine, and interviewed Samuel Goldwyn Jr. They were doing a 50th anniversary release of Wuthering Heights, was it? And he was saying, how, like, so I interviewed about love story, what makes a love story. And he said it's what keeps people apart is what makes the love story. So, having somebody falling into a bowl of pudding uh, might not be the best choice for, getting that romantic feeling going. It's like trying not to have that romantic feeling going. If you want, it's, um, if you want to something that's heartbreaking in your work, the important thing is not to have the character cry, it's to have the reader cry. And you do that by the character not crying and struggling not to fall apart. And then the reader will fall apart. Um, my husband is a comedy writer, and he says if you have the character laughing, you've saved the audience the trouble. So you don't want that. Here's another question. Let's see. Touches your heart, romantic feelings, happy. Describing a time you were the happiest in life. Okay, so the character being happy, you can work the landscape is a really good way to handle that. Um, that just when you're happy, everything is beautiful. So instead of saying, oh, she was so happy, talk about the sun on the trees, talk about the, something reflected in a puddle, the happiness will soak into the landscape and you can have the landscape speak. That's a really good way of handling it. Or the person is so discombobulated. There's a wonderful poem by Anna Akhmatova where she's hot for someone and she puts her left glove on her right hand rather than saying he was so great, I was so discombobulated, I didn't know what to do with myself, but I put my uh, put my right glove on my left hand. So that's the kind of thing that will show us, that somebody is like really disconcertingly, romantically interested in someone, as they do something like that. Um, how do I write a speech about the day I lose my belongings? Okay, so it's a character who has lost all, and they want to do this as a bit of a piece of dialogue. Uh, Reluctance is very helpful. Like somebody would say no luggage. It's like no, no luggage. And if we know that they've been burned out, um, that will take such a powerful uh, hit on us, as opposed to somebody telling somebody else something we, as the reader, the ultimate recipient of all information in a novel, something we already know. You're not going to get a bang out of that. You're going to get the bang from just no luggage. So GB says, I've been thinking lots about how Shakespeare dealt with emotions in Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet. Yeah, the excitement, the speed of delivery. I mean, playwriting is a little different than fiction because we can know what people are thinking. But, um, you know, effusive language is usually accompanies effusive emotion. You know, difficult emotion is short. The um, sentences you can't really get too much out at once. Yeah, take a look at Shakespeare and see how he handles it. Shakespeare often balanced reflected emotions by having the other character show the emotion. So people who are sorry for you or happy for you and so forth. Yeah, he uses secondary characters in a really interesting way. He also uses secondary characters to set up the problem of the play. You get many a time you get secondary characters or even walk-ons to begin the play, and they talk about the king and they talk about the ghost that's walking, just a couple of soldiers. They're not even important characters. Or you get secondary characters, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's talking about the central problem. Um, yeah, he had all kinds of tools. Um, Here's another question. How am I doing? Good. Um, how do you write a character talking with someone on the phone where we only hear their dialogue? Um, it depends on if it's a point of view character. If it's a point of view character and it's someone, they're talking to someone on the phone, um, well, then they would hear what the person said. Um, so it would be not the point of view person on the phone. It would be somebody else. And then the point of view character is watching that person and wondering who it is and what it is, and noticing very carefully, is the person laughing? Is he crying? Is he fiddling? Um, can you are we guessing who it is? Oh, yeah, he's talking to his ex, you know. Yeah, I know that face. Oh, he's doing that thing. So you'd look at it that way, um, as through the point of view character. Um, and then here's one that is, I want to write a story but don't know how to start the first chapter. I'm sure that you who have been with me through Writing Wednesday for some time know the answer to that question. I don't know how to start the first chapter. The first chapter, the first, the beginning of the first chapter especially, will be rewritten once you get to the end anyway, because you don't know when you start where you're going to end up, what you're going to need to set up in that first chapter. So I say just start anywhere, start wherever it makes sense to you, you know. And then when you get to the end, you'll go back to the beginning and you go, okay, how am I going to set this up? You're like bookends, right? Um, I don't know how to start the first chapter. I want to write a story. I already have my story in mind. Um, I would just reassure this person that it doesn't matter where you start. Just if, especially if you know your story. I always start with. I have always started with uh, the situation before the change. So my first novel starts with my character Astrid and her mother on a rooftop. They're still together, uh, but there's foreboding. It's Santa Ana wins, and we find out that the mother has done something really transgressive, and that she's a very difficult person. We set up the characters. We set up the situation antebellum, first, before the war, right? Um, my second book, it was a character who is worried about her boyfriend working as a model. So she's on the modeling gig and she's thinking about her boyfriend. So that when she finds out that he's missing, or he's been missing, when she finds out why, that's the first chapter. So I like to set up beforehand. So the Russian novels, the first one, the beginning, I start with World War I, because it's a book about the Russian Revolution and the roots are in World War I. So I want to show what the world was like before the revolution, but just before the revolution. This current one starts with the main character at home in a different place besides LA and getting a call saying that she needs to come back to LA and deal with something that she has long left behind. And then that starts the book. So that's an easy way to start a book. That's the way I like to do it. But now that I've read the talent code, maybe I will start trying other things, other ways to start a novel. There are many, many ways to do it. Um, anyway, so that's a big chunk of info. And I look forward to finishing the talent code and see how that works. And anything that gives you confidence, anything that makes the struggle make sense, so you don't despair, is a really important thing. So I'm very happy with that. Anyway, thank you all for coming, and I wish you good writing. Okay.